Chapter 264, Escape 4. The moment I stepped out of the elevator and tried to get out of the laboratory, my mana, which was depleting at an alarming rate, finally ran out. The mask fell off of my face, and the effects of Monarch's indifference ran out. Hey! Shh! *T. The moment my face was revealed, and I regained control of my body, the first thing I saw was 3 guards glaring in my direction. Standing in the opposite hall to me and taking out their weapons, they all rushed towards me. "We've found the suspect," I repeat, "we've found the suspect. We're currently engaging him at the entrance of the laboratory." They of course didn't forget to alert the other units. Without wasting time, taking out another bomb from my dimensional space, I pressed on a small button at the top of the bomb. Click! 1, 2, 3, 4. Re-entering the elevator, and hiding by the side, I closed my eyes and silently counted inside of my mind. The moment my count was about to reach 5, turning around, I threw the bomb towards the guards. Without looking, I hid by the side of the elevator. Boom! Hua! Ah! 2 seconds after throwing the bomb, a massive explosion ensued and the blood-curdling screams of the guards rang out throughout the whole upper floor. Standing behind the elevator, I could feel the heat from the explosion brush past me. Yei! Yei! Shortly after the explosion rang, smoke filled my vision, and the alarms rang. Covering my nose with the sleeve of my shirt, squinting, I moved out. The moment I turned around and looked at the aftermath of the explosion, the first thing I saw was the corpses of the guards on the floor. With blood and limbs splattered everywhere, the scene looked extremely gory. Even so, firming myself and moving through the broken glass, and pieces of flesh on the floor, I quickly made my way towards the exit of the facility. Clank! Ha! Opening the doors and exiting the laboratory, I involuntarily squinted my eyes and covered them with my arm. The side of my eyes teared up slightly. The sun. After 8 months of being locked up inside of the facility, I was finally able to see the sun. Never in my life would I have expected myself to miss the sun so much. For a brief moment, I just dazedly stood at the front of the laboratory. My emotions were a bit erratic, but I was able to quickly snap myself out of it. Now's not the time to get emotions. Turning around, I wondered. Where am I? Looking around, I noticed that I was currently in the middle of a forest. Behind me was the laboratory. The laboratory was hidden inside of a forest, and although it was still within the monolith, for the obvious reason it had to be moved a bit further from the actual headquarters. I can't waste time standing here. Realizing that I was still not in the clear, I decided to run into the forest. Unit 19 quickly arrived at the entrance of the laboratory. Yei! Yei! Standing outside of the laboratory, they could hear the blaring sound of the alarms ringing from inside of the facility. Clank! Opening the door and entering the laboratory, the members of the 19th unit paused at the scene presented before them. What in the world happened here? The guards standing at the entrance have been killed? Who's the one responsible for this? What? You're telling me that the surveillance and communication have been cut off? What about Professor Joseph? Many of them couldn't contain themselves and asked different questions. Their confusions only grew as time passed. Listening to the live reporters coming from the other squad units downstairs, they couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Walking up to his captain, of the members of the 19th unit reported. Captain, Unit 7 who are downstairs have reported Joseph as dead. Furthermore, Unit 15 has been annihilated, and 2 members from Unit 2 have been reported missing. What? All of the guards let out a breath of cold air. Cold sweat ran down their back. Was this all done by one person? But how was that possible? Solemnly looking at the scene, the captain spoke. Has anyone said anything about the identity of the target? Yes. Continue. According to reports, the target seems to be one of the test subjects that Joseph was working on. From reports, he seems to be called Subject 876. 876? The captain's brows knit. Weren't they under the effects of the serum? How could they have escaped? And isn't there a chip installed in their head? How is this possible? The more questions the captain asked, the more he realized how serious the situation was. If they were the ones who had gone downstairs, would they have also been killed like the other two squads? Just the thought sent chills down his back. What now, Captain? The captain wasn't a captain for no reason. Despite the situation, he was able to quickly recollect himself. Looking at his squad members, he ordered, "Calm down. Don't panic. From the looks of things, there only seems to be one target, and he is armed with explosives." Looking at the state of the upper floor, the captain continued, "From the looks of things, the target seems to have already escaped into the forest. I want you all to notify the other units of the situation. Tell them to be on their toes." Understood. Exchanging glances, the unit members did as their captain ordered. Taking out their communication devices, they quickly informed the other units and moved out of the facility. Stepping out of the laboratory, all of the members looked at their captain. "Captain, where should we go?" Squinting and looking around, the captain quickly looked towards a certain area and motioned for his members to follow. Being a captain, he had a lot of experience under his belt. Surveilling the forest and noticing a small irregularity in one of the bushes in the distance, he was able to quickly infer the location of where the target had run off to. "Over here." Dashing forward, he along with his team members disappeared into the wilderness.
Ha! Ha!
Breathing heavily, sweat trickled down the side of my cheeks. Even so, mustering every last bit of strength inside of my body, I continued to run. Now that the security had been alarmed about my whereabouts, I needed to distance myself as much as possible from them. Gulp. Gulp. As I was running, taking one mana recovering potion and one stamina recovering potion from my dimensional space, I quickly downed them. After that, taking out the watch that I had gotten from Thibaut a year ago, I quickly put it on my wrist. Tapping on the screen of the watch and loading it up, I fiddled with it for a couple of seconds. FWA. A holographic map quickly appeared in front of me. Staring at the map, unknowingly my running speed slowed down significantly. If I'm not wrong, I should be running in the right direction. The monolith was extremely large, and for obvious reasons, the laboratory that I had just come out from was located a bit off of the monolith. My current goal right now was to infiltrate the actual headquarters of the monolith. It was the only way I could escape. After contemplating for the past 8 months, I realized that this was the only way I could get out of this place. Not knowing exactly where the monolith was located on the world map, I knew that the only way I could get out was through the portals inside of the monolith. Fortunately, with Thibaut's watch on my wrist, I could gain access to the portal. Every portal use cost around 500 merit points, and with me having over 2,000 of them, I knew that as long as I could get to the portals, I would be able to make it safely back home. There's only one problem. I needed to infiltrate the actual monolith. Without a doubt, this was going to be harder than actually escaping the lab. Rustle. Hyuk. Snapping me out of my thoughts was a small rustling sound in the distance. Turning around, I noticed a silver streak of light quickly headed towards my direction. Ducking down, by a hairbreadth, I was able to dodge the incoming attack. Rolling on the ground, I lifted my head and glared in the direction of where the attack came from. I've finally caught up. Coming from out of the bushes, wearing a black uniform, was a tall, bald, tanned individual. On the right side of his uniform was a small band as well as a large 19. Holding onto a large metal axe, he solemnly looked in my direction. You must be 876. Similarly staring back at him, my eyes squinted. Unit 19 Squad Captain. The moment I realized the identity of the individual who had attacked me, my wariness increased. Each unit had a team captain, and apart from their obvious large amount of experience, what set them apart from their squad members was their individual strength. Each squad captain had the strength equivalent to rank. Above them were commanders whose strength ranged from rank to rank. Hew up. Seizing me up for a couple of seconds, without wasting any time, the 19th unit captain raised his axe and quickly slashed towards my direction. The moment the 19th unit captain raised his axe, I knew that I needed to act fast. Tensing my calves, instead of moving backward, I dashed forward. Against opponents that required large motions, the best way to defeat them was through close combat confrontations. And I knew that. With the chip inside of my head processing everything, taking a step to the right, and opening the palm of my right hand, I twisted my torso slightly and slapped towards my right. Right in the direction of where the axe was moving. KHHH. Touching the side of the axe, a small groan escaped from my lips as I was pushed back by a couple of steps. Fortunately, the moment my hand connected with the head of the axe, I was able to alter its course. Bam! The ground trembled. What th? Realizing that his attack had missed, the captain opened his eyes widely. But it was already too late. Now. Taking advantage of his distraction, I took a step forward. Grabbing onto the arm that was holding onto the axe, shifting my right foot, and turning around, I lifted the captain up and threw him on the ground. Bam! Back first, the captain hit the ground. Walk-walk. A pained groan escaped from the captain's mouth as spit flew in my face. Without giving the captain time to realize what had happened, I pierced his throat with my hand. Blood splattered on my face.
Ha, ha.
Wiping my face, which was stained in blood, I took deep breaths. For the next few minutes, without moving, I blankly stared at the sky. The fight ended much faster than I had originally anticipated. Excluding the fact that I was a bit stronger than my opponent, with the extreme training I endured for the past few months, I knew exactly how to handle my opponent. As of right now, I was on a different level compared to before. Such opponents weren't something that I couldn't handle. Rustle. Rustle. Before long, I could hear multiple rustling sounds coming from behind me. With my eyes closed, and remaining still, I patiently waited for them to surround me. This fight was necessary for my escape. Chapter 265, Escape 5. TSSSSS. The static sound of the radio transmitter echoed throughout the area. Bringing the radio transmitter towards my mouth, in a deep voice, I said, "This is Unit 19 speaking. Do you copy?" Unit 19? Copied. What's the situation? After a couple of seconds, someone responded. We've captured the target. I repeat, we've captured the target. You've captured the target? Roger. Understood. I've relayed the information to Units 8, 13, 21, and 29. They are on their way, please be patient. Copy that. How long till they arrive? Given their location, around 5 minutes. Understood, I'll be waiting. TSSSSS. 5 minutes. Turning the radio transmitter off and turning around, my eyes paused on the 4 individuals on the ground. They were 19th unit members. Each of them, although passed out, were still alive. Even though they were fairly skilled, it didn't take long for me to knock them out. Just their captain alone didn't take much, let alone them who were far below him in strength. Unlike their captain, I kept them alive. There was a reason for this. 6 mg, this should be enough. Taking out a couple of syringes from my dimensional space, carefully measuring the dosages on each of them, I removed any distracting thoughts inside of my mind. From what I remember, 2 milligrams is enough to render my mind numb, whilst 10 milligrams is enough to knock me out completely. The syringes that I was currently holding were things that I had gotten from Joseph's dimensional space after I killed him. They were all filled with the serum that I had been injected with for the past 8 months. It was now time I used it on someone else. I hope this works. Since I was pressed for time, I couldn't care less about being delicate and careful. Stabbing one of the guards in the shoulder, I quickly injected him with a dosage of the serum. Squeak! A squeaking sound came out from the syringe. Hook! The moment I pushed the serum into the guard's body, the guard's eyes shot wide open. For a brief moment, his eyes turned white. His body then started convulsing madly. Shh! *T, did I put too much? Grabbing the guard by the shoulders, I pressed him to the ground. Gua! Shh! *T, please work. I cursed as I pressed him onto the ground. The reason why I injected the guard with a dosage of the serum was because I wanted to numb his mind. Numb it to the point where, for a brief moment of time, he would fall into a drunken state and listen to my commands. However, I knew all too well that this plan had a lot of flaws. Too many variables were out of my control. For example, I didn't know what was the perfect dosage to use as well as the amount of time the serum would need to take effect. It had to be noted that it took around 2 months to create a single super soldier out of the thousands of subjects. Though I wasn't trying to create a super soldier myself, I still knew just how difficult this operation was. If it failed, I was done for. Therefore, come on, work. Pressing onto the convulsing guard with both hands, I clenched my teeth. Ghhh. After a couple of more seconds, to my relief, the guard stopped convulsing. Thereafter, opening his eyes, the guard dully looked at the sky without saying anything.
Ha.
Can you hear me? Breathing heavily, I asked whilst waving my hand in front of his face. Unfortunately, I was met with no response. Frowning slightly, I helped him up. Waving my hand at his face again, I repeated. Can you hear me? Once again, he didn't respond. Lowering my head, I looked at the syringe in my hand. Did I put too? Oh? Just when I was about to despair, to my surprise, the guard who I thought was motionless, followed my movement with his head. Instantly my eyes lit up. Moving my hand towards the right, I watched as the guard turned his head towards the right. Taking a step back, the guard took a step forward. A laugh involuntarily escaped from my lips, and my fists clenched. Even though he wasn't saying anything nor following my orders, this was enough for now. As long as they looked like they were under my command, everything was fine. All right, 6 milligrams it is. Turning my attention towards the other guards on the ground, I did the same thing as the first guard. This time, I didn't waste any time and moved on after each injection. Since it worked, I didn't need to worry about them. Just like the previous guard, upon injecting them with the serum, their bodies convulsed. Fortunately, just like before, it stopped after a couple of seconds. Next. After injecting 3 more guards, turning my attention towards the last guard on the floor, bending down on one knee, I tapped on my bracelet. Alongside a small dagger, a small hexagonal glass bottle appeared in my hand. Plop! Opening the bottle and covering my dagger with the contents of the bottle, I first injected the individual with a dose of the serum, this time 10 milligrams, and then slashed his face with the dagger. Gwawa mhhmmm. A blood-curdling scream resounded across the forest. Using my hand to cover his mouth, the muffled screams of the guard continued to echo throughout the forest. Despite his screams, I continued to slash his face. In fact, I sped up. I'm sorry, but you'll have to bear with it for just a little bit longer. I understood his pain all too well. I too went through that pain not so long ago. It was the worst pain thing I've ever felt throughout my entire life. But I didn't feel any guilt. If this was the necessary step that I needed to take in order to escape this hellhole, then so be it. MHHMMMM. MHHMMMM. For the next minute, the muffled scream of the guard continued to resound throughout the forest. This did not last for long as the guard soon passed out from the serum that I had injected in him.
Ha. Ha.
Done. Panting heavily, I slumped on the ground. Putting my dagger back in my dimensional space, I moved towards the guard and wiped the blood that was on his face. Then, taking out 3 healing potions that I got from the dimensional space that I took from their captain, I moved forward. This should work. Lifting his head slightly, uncapping the lids of the potions, I opened his mouth. VRRRRR. VRRRRR. Just as I was about to feed the guard the potion, in the distance I could hear the faint sound of vehicles quickly approaching my location.
Shh.
*T. Opening my eyes widely, I cursed. Without wasting any time, taking 3 potions at the same time, I forcefully shoved them down the guard's throat. Almost instantaneously, I could see the guard's face healing. Even then, as his injuries healed, the scars on his face remained. Letting go of the guard's head, I took out 2 mana recovery potions from my dimensional space. Gulp. Gulp. Shoving down the 2 potions down my throat, I quickly put the mask on my face. Wiggling around my face and covering it whole, my face changed that to the 19th Unit Squad Captain. Moments after I defeated the group, I copied their captain's face, replaced his clothes with mine, and punched his head to the point that it became unrecognizable. I had done this in preparation for what was to come next. Grabbing the passed-out, scarred guard by the collar, I moved forward. Behind me were the 3 other unit members. Screech! Screech! At the exact moment I moved forward, 3 large vehicles stopped before me. Clank! Stepping out of the vehicle were over 15 individuals all wearing similar uniforms. Standing at the forefront was a tall muscular man with a black mustache under his nose. Wearing a pair of sunglasses, a wild and suffocating aura exuded from his body. Commander Luther Black. Reading the tag by the side of his uniform, sweat trickled down my cheeks. The moment I saw the words Commander, I knew that I couldn't fight him. If I was caught, I was done for. Stepping forward, I sternly greeted. 19th Unit Captain reporting. Calmly nodding his head, Commander Luther's eyes paused on the individual in my hands. Pointing at him, he asked. Is this the suspect? That's correct. With my back straight, I confirmed. Studying the scarred individual from top to bottom, Commander Luther massaged his mustache. Scarred face just like the descriptions say. Every second that Luther spent examining the body in my hands felt like an eternity to me. Many questions such as, did he find something? Did he notice the fact that I am not the captain? Did he notice something wrong with my unit members, passed by my head? I knew that these were useless worries, but I couldn't control myself. To make matters worse, my mana had still not recovered. Within 2 minutes, the mask would start losing effect. Each second that the commander used to examine the corpse felt agonizing to me. Thankfully, the commander did not examine the body for too long. To think that this man has caused so many problems for us, he's still alive too? Turning his attention back to me, the commander flashed a toothy grin. You've done great. I was merely following orders. I humbly replied. Humble, I see. Caressing his mustache, the commander showed a satisfied look. Turning around, he chuckled and ordered. Let's get back to the headquarters and report the situation. Everyone get on the vehicles. Understood. Unanimously, all of the people present shouted. Over here. Motioning with his hands, one of the guards gestured for me and my unit to enter the vehicle he was in. To my luck, it was the one without the commander. Just as I was about to follow the individual into the car, the commander abruptly halted his footsteps. Turning his head, squinting, he asked.
Ah.
I only count 4 members here. What happened to your other one? For a split second, my heart stopped, and a chill ran down my spine. Thankfully, this was a question I had the answer to. Lowering my head, I pointed towards the distance where one could see the outline of a corpse. He, unfortunately, did not make it. I see, you have my condolences. Staring at the corpse, the commander lowered his head slightly and boarded the vehicle. After that, helping my unit members climb onto the back of the vehicle, I followed them into the vehicle. VRRRRR. VRRRRR. A minute after I boarded the vehicle, the car picked up its pace and sped into the distance. KHH. The moment the car started moving, my mind started spinning uncontrollably. Lowering my head towards my knees, the mask fell off of my face.
Ha.
Covering my face with my arms, I had a hard time breathing. That was too close. I had overexerted my mana way too much. Had another minute have passed, I was sure that my identity would have been exposed. Chapter 266, Escape 6. Exchanging glances with each other, 2 guards at the front of the car laughed out loud. Who would have thought that you were the lucky bastard that got to catch the escapee, huh, Jerome?
Yeah.
I'm fucking envious of you. So his name is Jerome. Listening to their conversation, I made a mental note to myself of every little detail. This was so that I could blend in better. With my head still in between my legs, I responded. You're absolutely right. There were a total of 10 people in the car, including my unit. From the brief conversations I was having with them, the name of the 19th unit captain was Jerome. He was 28 years old, and judging from how friendly they were being to me, I figured that he was someone popular. The layout of the car was 2 seats at the front of the car, with 5 more seats leaning by the side of the vehicle. Switching the conversation, one of the guards next to me spoke up. Man, who would have thought that the commander himself showed up?
Yeah.
Just his aura alone almost made me piss my pants. Tell me about it. Just imagine what Jerome must have gone through when questioned by him. With my head still lowered, I made small talk as well. This was so that I didn't look too suspicious.
Yeah.
It was really nerve-wracking. I thought that I was in front of a tiger. Just look at me, I'm so exhausted just from that exchange. You indeed look tired. Laughter erupted in the car. I too laughed, but it was a fake one. My mind was too preoccupied with other thoughts to care about whether it sounded genuine or not. 6 bombs, 8 serum dosages, 4 health recovery potions, and 18 mana recovery potions. If I had to count how many people I killed the past few hours or so, the head count would be around the 20s. Every time I killed someone, I would never forget to collect their dimensional space. In it were many resources that could become extremely useful for me. Bombs and serum being prime examples. Without them, I would have never have made it as far as I did. That aside, I'm still not in the clear though. A bitter smile appeared on my face. My mana was currently at around 1/9 of what it should be. Having depleted all of my mana from the stunt I pulled in order to escape the lab, I had a hard time recovering it to what it was before. Despite the multiple mana recovery potions I chugged in, they were only the lowest grade, and thus I barely recovered anything. This was also the reason why I was only able to hold out for a couple of minutes when the commander came. To make matters worse, with my mask now off, I had to be in this awkward position where I had my face in between my legs and arms. Fortunately, I was wearing a hat and thus they did not notice the fact that I wasn't bald like the 19th unit captain was. Had I not thought of this beforehand, they would have realized that I wasn't him just because of the fact that I wasn't bald. Man, how long do we still have till we arrive? 20 more minutes. The road is a bit rough here, so it'll take that much. I'm hungry. 20 minutes. Listening to the conversation the other guards were having, it became even more apparent to me just how big the monolith domain was. Just the distance between the lab and the actual headquarters was 20 minutes. Just how much land did they cover? And how did they manage to keep it hidden for so long? I wondered as the car sped. It'd be best to act before I arrive. Realizing that it would take 20 more minutes to arrive, I opted to wait till my mana recovered a bit more before making move. Though the main reason was I was choosing to act late was because of my mana, it wasn't the only reason. Peeking from the corner of my eyes, and looking in the direction of where the other cars were, I knew that things were not as easy as they seemed to be. I just had a hunch. At the same time, in a different vehicle. Glancing at Commander Luther next to him and noticing a small smirk at the edge of his lips, the 7th Unit Captain, Isaac Lawn, curiously asked. "Commander, is something wrong?" Lowering his head, Commander Luther looked at Isaac and flashed his teeth. "Oh, I just thought of something funny." "Something funny?" Secretly glancing at his unit members in the vehicle, Isaac noticed that each of them had a confused look on their face. Her. Reading the mood, a chuckle escaped from Commander Luther's lips. Lowering his head and looking at Subject 876, who was passed out on the ground, with an amused smile, Commander Luther traced his thick fingers around his scars. Startled by the commander's weird behavior, Isaac involuntarily raised his voice. "Sir, what are you doing?" Instead of answering, Commander Luther continued to trace his finger all over Subject 876. Scratching the side of his chin, he muttered out loud. "I wonder how he managed to give him scars. Is there a mask, or was he someone that he killed long ago and stored in his dimensional space? No, that wouldn't work since he's alive. There also doesn't seem to be a mask. How peculiar." "Excuse me? What?" The captain's eyes opened widely. Pointing at the scarred man on the ground, he frustratedly asked. "Are you suggesting that he isn't the one we are looking for?" "Yes." The commander nodded his head. A chill ran down every guard present in the room. Not once did they doubt the identity of the scarred man before them. If not for their commander pointing it out, would they have ever found out? Just the thought took their breath away. Weakly looking at the scarred man, Isaac asked. Then who is the one responsible?" "It's the 19th Unit Captain, Jerome." Luther replied without the slightest bit of hesitation in his voice. "Jerome." Glancing at his unit members, Isaac struggled to find the right words to say. "But how is that possible? I saw him just moments ago. He looked identical." Staring at the 7th Unit Captain by the side of his eyes, Luther asked. "Did he though?" "Yes," firmly replied Isaac. Though they only met briefly, Isaac did not find anything strange about him. Naive. A smirk appeared on Luther's face before he turned his attention back to Subject 876. "Though he may have fooled you guys, he couldn't have fooled me. I've met Jerome a couple of times in the past, and I can tell you that it's not him. His face maybe, but..." Pausing and looking at everyone, Luther said. His frame was completely different. Listening to the commander's point, Isaac's brows knit as he muttered out loud. Now that you mention it, he did look a lot more skinny than the last time I saw him. All the unit captains knew each other. This was a given. All of the squads worked with each other most of the time, so everyone knew who Jerome was. He was a tanned muscular man with a bald head. That was how everyone knew him for. Recalling the meeting they had not too long ago, a shocked look appeared on Isaac's face as he lifted his head up. But how is it possible for him to have the same face as Jerome? It usually took weeks for a face mask to be prepared. For Subject 876 to actually have a mask identical to that of Jerome in that short period of time made no sense. That was unless someone was actively helping him. That's what I'm wondering as well, Luther replied with a solemn look. The only thing that comes to mind is that this is the work of an artifact or that someone is helping him, but I'm not too sure. An artifact? Yes. As of right now, the second possibility was the one that made more sense, but if it was the first option. A look of greed flashed past his eyes. If it really is an artifact, I really want to get my hands on it. Pretending to not have heard the commander's last words, Isaac hesitatingly asked. Sir, but what if there is no artifact and this was actually Jerome? Impossible. Luther firmly replied. But what makes you so sure? At first I wasn't, Luther raised his finger. But right before entering the vehicle, I asked him what happened to his last member. And his story checked out. There really was someone dead in the distance. Taken aback, Isaac asked. So what made you think that he was an imposter? If the story checked out, what made him so sure about the fact that the man before them wasn't a fake Subject 876? Simple really. Pausing, Luther teasingly smiled and looked at Isaac dead in the eyes, his unit members. The moment Jerome turned his head, they turned their heads as well. What? Odd, right? Could this have been a coincidence? Leaning back, Luther nodded his head. True, but once I looked at them closely and noticed their unfocused eyes, I realized that something wasn't right. But I recalled reading something before the mission started. Taking out a few documents from his dimensional space, Luther flashed them before Isaac. It was then that everything clicked. Unfocused eyes, and what's this? Yes, they were under the effect of a drug. A Drew. It's the same drug that Subject 876 was being injected with. I know because I've read the reports. Being a commander in a high position, unlike the other captains, Luther had access to more confidential information. Being the one in charge of capturing him, he obviously also had some information about Subject 876. It wasn't strange for him to know the effects of the drug. Realizing this, a small sound escaped from the captain's mouth before as he wondered. Taking the documents and reading through the report, Isaac lifted his head and wondered. Then why didn't you do anything? There was enough evidence to take him down, why didn't he? Her. A throaty laugh escaped from Luther's lips before it was replaced by a smirk. I in fact already did do something. You did? Isaac was taken aback. He didn't recall the commander ever moving, what could he have possibly done? Noticing the confusion in Isaac's eyes, Luther looked at the front of the car. Aren't we leading him right where the headquarters are? A realization suddenly dawned on the captain. That's right, since we know about the fact that he's an imposter and he doesn't know that we know, by directly leading him to the monolith and capturing him there, not only do we reduce the risk, but we can also guarantee results faster. The more the captain thought about it, the more amazed he was by the commander's planning. I see, I understand now, Commander. leaning back and interlocking his fingers together, Luther arrogantly smiled. That little fucker probably thinks that we're completely clueless about his schemes, little does he know that I know everything. Sir, there seems to be something wrong with the car. Cutting him off was the drive of the car. Turning his head around, and staring at the vehicle behind them, Luther noticed the vehicle swirling left and right a couple of times. This continued a couple of more times before stopping. Then, just like normal, the vehicle continued following them from behind. Interesting, Luther said, squinting. Keeping watch of the vehicle behind them, for the next 5 minutes or so, the car continued to follow them from behind. Apart from that initial swerving, nothing suggested that there was something wrong with the other car. But everyone in the car all understood that something had definitely gone down in the car. Had it been before, they might have thought it was just a small rock, but now they couldn't help but start questioning what truly had happened. This was especially so after listening to Luther's evaluation. Sir, we're close to the headquarters, what should we do? Before long, a small gate appeared in the distance. Behind it was a colossal structure that spanned kilometers in length. Decked with glass windows that reflected the sunlight, and built using high-tech precision cutting technology, was the monolith. The main headquarters of the villains. Chapter 267, Escape 7. Commander, the car has stopped. The driver of the car alerted. How should I proceed? Almost a kilometer away from the entrance of the monolith, the driver saw the car behind them swerve towards the right before coming to a halt. Having never taken his eyes off of the vehicle behind him, Luther raised his hand slightly and ordered for the car to stop as well. Stop the car, and tell the unit in the other car to get out as well. Understood. Screech. Pressing onto the brake, the car came to a halt. In front of them, not far from where they were, another vehicle came to a halt. Get out. Opening the doors of the car, Luther jumped off of the vehicle. Behind him, 5 other people came out, including the 7th Unit Captain, Isaac. Hurry up. Not far from them, Luther gestured for the other unit in the distance to hurry up. Before long, there were a total of 10 people behind Luther. Turning around and looking at all of the unit members present, Luther warned. The suspect may try to use bombs, so try your best to spread out and surround the car. Having received brief reports about Subject 876, the commander knew that his strength was in the range and that he somehow got his hands on explosives. Luther wasn't worried about 870 SIX's strength. He himself was ranked. He could make quick work of 876. His only worry was the bombs. If he was hit directly by them, even though he won't die, he'd still get injured. Less needs to be said about the other people present. They were all weaker than him. Thus, in order to minimize the casualties from the bombs, spreading out the soldiers was a must. Commander? Stopping a couple of meters away from the vehicle, Isaac looked at the commander who looked back and nodded back. Understood. Stepping forward, Isaac shouted. Subject 876, we know that you're in there. Get out of the car and surrender. Waiting for a couple of minutes, Isaac was met with no response. Figured. Isaac shook his head, before looking at Luther and asking. Commander, how should we proceed? Squinting, Luther carefully looked at the vehicle. Waving his hand, a blue translucent shield appeared before him. In his right hand was a large metal mace. Pointing towards the forest, he looked towards the other unit and ordered. Send someone to search the forest, we can't exclude the possibility that 876 has already escaped into the forest. Roger. 5 people unanimously shouted before running into the forest behind the car. Russell. Russell. Get behind me. With the shield before him, Luther gestured the 7th unit to follow him and slowly walked towards the vehicle. Because of the threat of the bombs, Commander Luther decided to approach this prudently. Clank! Approaching the car, Luther carefully opened the door. Glancing at his other members, he nudged his head slightly. Clank! 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 Instantaneously, everyone moved around the vehicle and opened the other doors of the car with their weapons raised. Upon opening the door, everyone braced themselves for an attack, but contrary to their expectations, they were met with deathly silence. Exchanging glances with each other, everyone looked inside of the vehicle. Because the glasses were tinted, they were only able to see what was inside of the vehicle only upon opening the doors. Entering the car and looking around, a confused look appeared on Isaac's face. Commander, the suspect is not in the car. It's possible that he escaped. Are you sure? Positive, sir. Glancing around the car, he briefly said, but there seem to be the other unit members here, each passed out. Are they dead? Approaching one of the people in the car, Isaac placed his finger on his neck. Upon noticing a pulse, he responded. Negative. So he chose to leave them alive? Frowning, Luther muttered before moving forward and entering the vehicle. Let me take a look. Upon entering the vehicle, Luther looked around. Just like Isaac reported, everyone in the car was passed out, but were dead. 1, 2, 3, 8. Counting the number of people present, he managed to count 8 people in total. Odd, has he run away? Or is he hiding? The more Luther looked at the situation, the bigger, more ominous the feeling inside him grew. Unable to read Luther's thoughts, Isaac asked. What should we do, sir? Kill them all. What? Luther's reply startled Isaac. Why? They are alive. Idiot. Luther looked at Isaac as if he was a fool. Did you completely forget what I said before? What do I? Isaac suddenly paused and opened his eyes widely. You don't mean?
Yeah.
Arrogant Ali looking at all of the people present in the car, Luther nodded his head. The little fucker can change faces. What if he threw one of the bodies away and tried to disguise himself as one of the people here? Ah. Nice try. B. D. Cutting Luther off was a small repetitive ticking sound. It was then that, to his horror, almost simultaneously, 2 of the 8 guards who were passed out opened their eyes and took out a small spherical object from their pockets. Pressing on top of it, Commander Luther opened his eyes widely. A curse escaped from his lips. Shh! *T. Get out! Boom! A massive explosion reverberated, and a sea of fire raged. Moments before the car stopped. We're almost there. Oh. It's about time. Jerome, have you recovered enough? It's about time we arrive at the headquarters. Get ready. With my head still lowered, I groggily replied. Sure. Bah, dump. Bah, dump. Bah, dump. The closer we got to the headquarters, the more nervous I became. For the past 15 minutes or so, using the chip in my head, I simulated over 100 different scenarios. In it, I was calculating the chances of me escaping. Out of the hundreds of simulations, there was only one method that could give me the slightest chance at escaping this place, and even then, it was extremely dangerous and filled with suffering. Hoo! I exhaled. What choice do I have? Gritting my teeth, my brows knit tightly. Just the thought of what I was about to do next sent shivers down my spine. But I can't afford to be picky. I knew this all too well. If I wanted to escape, this was the only way. Furthermore, a part of me knew that I was already exposed and that this was the only way for me. Instead of waiting for something bad to happen, it's best to act immediately. Thus, taking out 5 syringes that were filled with the serum from my dimensional space, I slowly lifted my head up and muttered out loud. Can we stop over here? Do you need to take a piss, Jerem, huh? Who are you? Spurt. Stabbing towards my right, I quickly injected the guard next to me with the serum. Before the others could react, removing the belt off of me, I moved forward. Dashing forward, before the 2 guards at the back could remove their belts, I jumped towards the guard on the right side of the vehicle and stabbed him in the neck. Squeak! Letting go of the syringe, stomping on the seat of the car, I propelled my body to the other side of the car. With another syringe in my hand, I repeated the same thing and injected the other guard with a dose of the serum. This time the dosage was around 10 milligrams, thus, upon injection, they passed out immediately. Hyuk!
Ha!
Their shouts startled the guards at the front. What the? Hey! What's going on? Instantly the car started swearing left and right. Gripping on the metal bar at the top of the car, I hooked my feet around the front seat of the car and let go. Using my core, I pushed my body forward, crossing my hands, I simultaneously stabbed both guards in the shoulder. The squeaking sound of the syringe being pressed rang in the car. Squeak! Squeak! Right after I injected them with the serum, putting my hand on the wheel of the car, I quickly took control of the vehicle. Shoving the driver of the car to the back, I managed to regain control of the car.
Ha! Ha!
The first part is done. Breathing heavily, I kept my focus on the road. At the moment we were still in the forest area, but in the distance, I could see the faint outline of the monolith. Slowly, the density of the trees started to diminish. Following the cars ahead for the next couple of minutes, from time to time, I would glance behind me. Towards Jorom's unit members. Screech! About a kilometer away from the monolith, pressing on the brake of the car and turning the wheel all the way to the right, a screeching sound resounded and the car swerved. The moment the car stopped, quickly hooping to the back of the car, and taking out 4 bombs from my dimensional space, I handed them to my squad members and ordered. Press on the top of this as soon as a guy with a mustache enters the car. Staring at me with emotionless eyes, I was met with no response. Not minding it, I put it in their inner pockets and closed their eyes. Click, click, click. Just in case. Taking out another bomb from my dimensional space, I quickly set a timer of 5 minutes and hid it beneath one of the seats. This was my plan B in case the others couldn't follow my orders. The reason why I didn't set a timer with the other bomb was that I didn't know how long it would take for them to search the vehicle. From my calculations, 5 minutes was the max amount of time I estimated it would take them to thoroughly search the car. If unit members failed to listen to my orders, then this last one was my insurance. Clank! Once I finished setting up everything, slowly opening the side of the door, I closed it and entered the forest. Because I exited from the other side of the car, the others weren't able to notice me leaving the car. Entering the forest, I moved forward and stopped not so far from them. Evening my breathing and hiding my presence as much as possible, I looked at the guard surrounding the car. From where I was, I could overhear some of the conversations they were having. Subject 876, we know that you're in there. Get out of the car and surrender. Are they dead? Send someone to search the forest. We can't exclude the possibility that 876 has already escaped to the forest. Sneakily moving around the vegetation, I approached the other 2 vehicles in the distance. Behind me, I could hear the rustling sounds of the guards searching for me. Please work. As I was moving, I secretly prayed for my plan to work. If not, then everything would be for naught. Fortunately, Boom! A massive explosion resounded not so far from where I was. Now! The moment the explosion rang, I sprinted towards the vehicle in the distance. I had to be quick. Although the bombs were powerful, they weren't something that the commander couldn't take. Even if caught off guard. I knew that he was still alive. Hoo-ah! The horse scream was the perfect testament to my conjunction. Taking out the last bomb in my hand, I stepped on the pedal of the car and sped at full speed towards the gate of the monolith. VRRRR. VRRRR. The booming sound of the car engine roared throughout the area as it quickly sped up towards the gate. Stop him! Behind me, I could hear the commander's hoarse voice. Listening to his voice, I could feel the deep-seated hatred he had for me. Ignoring him, and speeding ahead, in the distance, I could see the startled look of the guards guarding the entrance. Why-yi? Why-yi? The color red flashed as the guards quickly rushed to activate the protective measures. You there, stop! Stop! But it was too late. Clank! Pressing on the top of the bomb in my hand, just when I was 100 meters away from the gate, dropping the bomb at the bottom of the vehicle and putting on a small weight on the pedal of the car, I kicked the door open and jumped out. Quack! Jumping out, and hitting the hard cement, I felt the air get knocked out of me. Many of my bones broke and fractured upon impact. KHH. Lifting my head slightly, and staring at the vehicle in the distance, I watched as the car crashed into the gates of the monolith. The moment the car hit the gates, a sea of flames spread out from it and engulfed the entire area. Boom! Following that was the sound of a massive explosion. KHHH. Mustering every last bit of strength in my body, dragging my injured body forward, I made my way towards the gates of the monolith. Arriving close to the gate, I could feel the heat coming from raging flames due to the explosion brushing past my skin. Taking out a ring from my dimensional space, I put it on my finger and removed a small black bracelet off of my wrist. Gulp! Opening my mouth, I put the bracelet into my mouth and swallowed. Who would have ever thought I'd go through this again? Upon swallowing the bracelet, a bitter smile appeared on my face. KHH. Limping forward, I slowly entered the flames. Chapter 268, Them 1. Inside an office space, a beautiful young girl with glossy black hair and obsidian black eyes sat behind a large wooden desk. Behind her, the sunlight coming from the sun directly shined through the window brushing past her skin, further emphasizing her beauty. Flipping through a long pile of papers, the young girl's brows would knit from time to time. Young miss, how should we proceed? Standing in front of her was a fairly young man. With his back straight and a gentle smile on his face, he asked. Lifting her head slowly and putting one of the papers down, the young girl's eyes glossed over the paper for a couple of more seconds before opening her mouth. Allocate the Night Gall dungeon to the senior members. Tell them to use it to train the new recruits. Understood. The young man smiled and asked. What about the Adriana dungeon? The Adriana dungeon? Brushing her hair towards her ear, the young girl mused for a bit before answering. Allocate that to Beta Squad, they need more training. As you wish, young miss. Taking note of her instructions, the young man looked at the girl and curtly asked. Is there anything else you would like me to do? No, the young girl shook her head, before once again diverting her attention towards the papers on the desk. Thank you for your hard work, Maxwell. You may leave. As you wish, young miss. At the young girl's command, Maxwell lowered his head slightly. Turning around, he made his way towards the door. Reaching for the handle of the door, Maxwell suddenly stopped. Turning around, and staring at the young girl who was tirelessly working, after hesitating for a bit, he worriedly said. Young miss, I know that you're working hard for the guild, and everyone is very appreciative of that, but please don't overwork yourself. MHM. Without looking up, the young girl casually responded. She was already too immersed in her work to care about anything else.
Ha.
Staring at Amanda, a trace of pity flashed Maxwell's eyes. Sighing and shaking his head, he turned around and left the room. Please do heed my words, young miss. Clank. Once Maxwell left the room, silence descended in the room. Apart from the scribbling sound coming from the young girl's direction, no other noise could be heard. Flip. 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 After a while, flipping through a series of files, the young girl paused and knit her brows tightly. This isn't correct. The numbers don't quite match here. The young girl who was busily looking through the files was in fact Amanda. Ever since Ren's death, just like she had planned originally, she dropped out of the academy. She then proceeded to join the guild, and from there, she slowly started adapting to a leadership role. Of course, for obvious reasons, the bigger problems were being handled by the more senior members of the guild. At the moment Amanda was only dealing with the smaller issues. This would of course change in the future when she gained more experience, but for now, she was content with this. She of course also did not neglect to train. Being the future guild master of the #1 guild in the world, Amanda needed to be strong. With the aid of the elders and resources available to her, Amanda's rank quickly shot up all the way to rank. Pretty much in line with what she estimated she would have been had she stayed in the lock. Slowly but surely, Amanda was starting to adapt to her new role. At least that was how it looked on the surface. In reality, Amanda was using work as an excuse to cope with the pain that she was feeling every day. From time to time, she would have nightmares of that day, resulting in her being unable to sleep. The only way she was able to deal with those nights was by shoving herself with work. She just needed something to set her mind somewhere else. 8 months passed, and though the pain was still there, it didn't hurt as much as before. Even so, she would still get those nightmares from time to time. D. Disrupting Amanda out of her focus was her alarm. Glancing at the alarm and looking at the time, Amanda put the papers down and mumbled. It's already time? She was so immersed in her work that she did not realize the fact that she had been working for more than 10 hours already. Standing up, Amanda grabbed a black cashmere felt coat that was resting on the back of her chair and put it on. Putting her hands on her pockets, Amanda headed towards the entrance of her office. Just as she was about to leave, halting her steps right before the door, Amanda turned around and glanced towards the corner of the room. Sitting on top of the shelf was a small teddy bear. Staring at it for a couple of seconds, a trace of sadness flashed her eyes. For the next couple of seconds, Amanda just stared at the teddy in the distance. After that, pursing her lips, she turned around and left the room. Clank. I hope you're doing well up there. Foam. Inside of a white room, flames suddenly erupted, covering the whole room. The flames continued to rage for the next 10 seconds before quickly disappearing and revealing a translucent red card standing in the middle of the room. Experiment log number 1574, mana lingering in room, 38%. A robotic voice sounded. Standing opposite to the room, and staring at it through a large glass, Melissa touched the middle of her glasses with her index finger and lifted them up slightly. Still missing 8%. Her goal was a mana efficiency loss of 30%. Compared to last year where it was at 49%, she managed to improve the magic card to the point where it was now thinner and more efficient than before. Still, there's still work to do. It was still not enough for commercial use. The closer she was to the goal, the harder it became for her to develop the card further. Melissa knew this best. Therefore, Taking out a piece of paper, Melissa sat down on a stool and started doing some calculations. What if I altered the magic circle a bit? Perhaps simplify it? The magic card itself seems fine, but that could also. Staring at Melissa mumbling to herself in the corner of the lab, Rosie, her assistant, entered the testing room and cleaned up the place. Ever since 8 months ago, Melissa had pretty much holed herself up in the lab. Although she used to hole herself up in the lab before as well, this year she spent even more time inside of the lab. She had gotten so obsessed with the research that she had started neglecting sleep and food. Despite having the best resources available, she tended to sleep in the lab more than in her own room. She was totally addicted. Sigh, I hope she doesn't overwork herself. Rosie muttered as she cleaned up the room. Having been Melissa's attendant for the past 2 years, she had gotten quite close to her. Rosie obviously did not like seeing her like that.
Ha.
After spending the next 10 minutes or so cleaning up the room, she walked out of the room and made her way towards Melissa. Melissa, I'm due. Standing behind Melissa, Rosie suddenly noticed a stack of paper by the side of her desk. Thinking that it was trash, she picked it up and briefly glanced at them. What the? Upon reading the papers, Rosie's eyes opened up slightly. Looking at Melissa, Rosie muttered out loud. There's someone else who owns this project? Overhearing Rosie's mutter, Melissa turned around. Staring at the papers in her hand, she quickly snatched them. Give me that, that's confidential. Because she spent most of the time in the lab, Melissa had forgotten that she had put the contract out. Fortunately, apart from Rosie, no one else entered the lab, else they would have found out about Ren's involvement in the magic card system, not that it really mattered anymore. Wait, I thought that you were the only one who was working on this project. Since when there was someone else? What? Turning around and looking at Rosie, Melissa raised her brow. How did you get the idea that I was the only one that was doing the project? I just thought that it was yours because I've never seen anyone else helping you. Well, that's a given. I'm doing most of the work. Then. The project idea and framework wasn't mine, so I can't help it. Rosie let out a weird sound. Ignoring her, Melissa leaned back on her stool. She suddenly thought of a problem. Actually, now that you've mentioned the other owner, how should I handle the payment? Originally Ren was meant to send it to a private bank account of his, but he died before he could even get back to her. Whenever she asked, he would always say, "Bank account? That? Well, I'll give it to you once I make it." Why not make it now? To be honest, it's a bit of a hassle. Recalling his face when he said those words made Melissa want to punch him in the face. Clenching her fists, she muttered. This bastard, even when he's dead, he's giving me trouble. Though she said that, there was not an ounce of malice in her words. She was merely venting her frustrations. What should I do? Brushing her hair by her ear, Melissa massaged her forehead. She was trying her best to think of solutions. It was then that she suddenly got an idea. Wait, why don't I ask Amanda? She might know since she's also part of the project. If there was anyone that would be able to help her, it was Amanda. She too was part of the project, and she seemed to be quite close to Ren. Perhaps she knew something. This might work. Taking out her phone, she typed a message and quickly sent her a text. At the same time, standing in front of a large building, amidst a crowd of people, the eyes of all men and women were focused in a particular direction. Is she a model? I doubt it. I've seen many models before, but of them are as beautiful as her. She's hella hot. Wah, she's so pretty. with a long stylish black cashmere coat that perfectly complemented her glossy black hair and eyes. A stunning woman stood at the entrance of the building, seemingly waiting for someone. With her head lowered, Amanda scrolled through her phone. She was completely unbothered by the stares. Ding! Ding! Her phone would vibrate from time to time. Sad face Melissa Melissa, hey, Amanda, I have something to talk to you about. Amanda, regarding? Melissa, it's regarding the project I'm working on. Amanda, the magic card one? Melissa.
Yeah.
Amanda, are you almost done? Melissa, it's not that, it's about the payment. Once it's done, who should I send the money to? Amanda, As she was typing, many of the males around her wanted to strike up a conversation with her, however, they refrained from doing so. She had this cold exterior that made it hard for anyone to approach her. It was as though there was this invisible wall around her that made it hard for anyone to approach her. Excuse me. That of course did not apply to everyone. There would always be that one fool in the crowd. Confidently moving towards Amanda, was a fairly handsome young man with brown hair and green eyes. With his hand on his neck, and a gentle smile on his face, he asked. Hey, are you waiting for someone? Brushing his hair up, he nudged his head slightly. How about grabbing something to eat with me later? With her head lowered, Amanda completely ignored the man who was speaking to her. As a result, the man was put in an awkward situation. Excuse me, did you know? Sister. Cutting the man off was a shrill sound in the distance. Lifting her head up, Amanda stared at a young girl that was speedily running in her direction. Nola. Instantly, her cold exterior vanished and a warm smile replaced it. The moment she smiled, almost every person around her froze up. Turning their heads, they couldn't help but want to engrave the scene inside of their minds. She's
so
beautiful. Everyone thought.
Wah.
Sister. Not minding their attention one bit, Amanda bent down slightly and extended her arms. Not long after, Nola ran into her arms. Sister. Embracing Nola, Amanda patted her head. How was preschool, Nola? Did you have fun? It was fun. Is that so? Today, I had lot of fun because sister was coming. Also there was this big dinosaur that was so scary. Listening to Nola's words, Amanda would add a few words here and there. And then he suddenly scared him and I was like, no, I won't be scared. Wow, you go Nola. Despite Ren's death 8 months ago, Amanda never went back on her word. She did not kick Ren's parents out of the apartment that she had given them and continued to have someone guard them 24/7. During Ren's funeral, Nola had approached her and cried with her. It was then that she met Ren's parents for the first time. From the brief conversation she had with them, they were able to learn of her identity, and from there they started talking from time to time. It eventually got to the point where they were comfortable enough to let her pick up Nola at the daycare. This was mostly due to Nola's insistence, but Amanda did not mind this one bit. She liked to be with Nola, it felt therapeutic for her. Every time she would meet up with Nola, her stress and worries would quickly dissolve. Furthermore, since she owned the building and it was near the guild, she decided to move there as well. So it was no trouble for her. Then, the teacher suddenly appeared and protected everyone. What? I did not need protection like the others. Is that so? Listening to Nola, the edges of Amanda's lips curled upwards. Nola, it's about time we head home, or we'll be late. Nola nodded her head. Taking Nola by the hand, Amanda slowly stood up. Turning her head, and finally noticing someone standing next to her, Amanda asked. Sorry, do you need something from me? Staring at Amanda, the male who tried to flirt with her moments ago opened and closed his mouth a couple of times. Stuttering, he shook his head. No. Okay. Lowering her head and once again looking at Nola, Amanda gently asked. Do you want to stop at the ice cream store first? At Amanda's suggestion, Nola's eyes started sparkling. This caused the edges of Amanda's lips to pull up even more. Okay, ice cream it is. 6:31 p.m. After buying Nola an ice cream at the ice cream store nearby, Amanda brought her back home. Arriving before a large wooden door, Amanda rang the doorbell. Ding! Dong! Coming! A couple of seconds after ringing on the door, a muffled voice echoed from the other side of the door. Not long after, the door opened, and a beautiful woman opened the door. Clank! Staring at Amanda, Samantha Dover smiled sweetly. Oh my, if it isn't Amanda! Thank you again for bringing Nola home. Lowering her head and caressing Nola in the head, Samantha said. I hope she didn't cause you any troubles. Of course not, Amanda politely replied, whilst looking at Nola. She's sweet. There's no way she'll be a bother. That's good to hear. Samantha smiled. As they were talking, a nice fragrance suddenly enveloped the corridor, prompting Amanda's nose to open up slightly. Unknowingly, the edges of her lips started salivating as she smacked her lips a couple of times. Noticing Amanda's reaction, Samantha smiled. I'm making a roast, you want to eat with us? Maybe next time, I still have work to do today. Blushing slightly, Amanda politely refused. Even though she had gotten closer to Ren's family, she was still not very comfortable eating with them alone. Thus, she refused. Seemingly having read Amanda's thoughts, Samantha did not push any further. Oh, I see, that's a pity. I'm sorry for this. Gratefully looking at Samantha, Amanda bid Nola.
Goodbye.
Bye Nola, I'll see you next week. Just as Amanda was about to leave, she felt a slight tug at the hem of her coat. Turning around, she saw Nola looking up at her. Trembling slightly, her eyes looked extremely downcast. Sister, don't go. Amanda's heart trembled. By the side, Samantha tried to soothe Nola. Nola, let go of Amanda. She's busy. Those eyes. Staring at Nola's eyes, Amanda's heart started to hurt. If it was anyone else they might have not been able to notice it, but she knew those eyes all too well. It was the same eyes she had when she was young. She still misses Ren. The more she looked at Nola, the bigger the pain in her heart became. Those were the eyes of someone that was lonely. Putting on a smile, Amanda took her phone out and sent a quick message. After that, turning around she looked at Samantha and said, You know what, it seems like I do have time to spare.
Wah.
The moment Amanda said those words, Nola's face bloomed into a beautiful smile as she jumped towards Amanda. Caressing Nola's head, Amanda decided to use this opportunity to let Ren's parents know about the magic card system. She believed that if there was anyone that Ren would want to give the money to, it would be them.